part one is just the death system, the who, where, how, just the definition for it is the dynamic patterns through which a society mediates its relationship with morality in order to remain visible as a culture and meet the needs of the individual. This includes burials, like the cemeteries, morgues, hospice facilities, and things along that line. In the American culture, the warnings, a few warning signs would be if somebody's not feeling good and they go to the doctor and the doctor prescribes them or diagnoses them as like cancer or something. That would be like a warning because you're not feeling good. Preventing death. Many times you can go to the doctor and they'll give you medicine, and that can help prevent death, like chemo and different medicines along those lines. Caring for the dying, like I said previously, most of the time we use hospice nurses to come in and check on the people who are slowly dying, like people with Alzheimer's and stuff. But also sometimes the family will take care of them, just depending on how close or if they have family or not. When we dispose of the dead, we normally have either cremation or a burial. Whenever people discuss about death and the dead, most of the time we avoid talking about the elephant in the room. We try to take their minds off of it just to help with the grieving process a little better. The social aspect of it, we let everyone know, such as like their bosses, friends that aren't like considered close, and we also cancel like all their accounts, such as like banking, Netflix, stuff like that. And killing, like intentional killing, is wrong in America. It is actually a criminal act of violence. You can get sent to prison for it. So I'd advise not doing that. In the Albania culture, the warning or the predictions, and it's kind of like the legends will tell them the warning signs. So like your grandparents or great grandparents will kind of feel like something's off with you, and spiritually they'll, or with themselves even. Preventing death, they use a lot of prayer, and sometimes in the more recent years they use hospitals, similarly to us. Caring for the dying, again, they use prayer, and back in the day they used to use like homemade medicine with like herbs and stuff, but nowadays they're more drugs like we use are more available to them than they were previously. Disposing of the body, they do not believe in cremation. They believe that everybody should be buried in the ground, that way the souls can go up. If you're cremated, then obviously your soul won't leave your body. It's already gone. Discussion about death and the dead. You give your condolences at the viewing, and that's basically it. Like, you basically just give your condolences. Sometimes in more recent years you use cell phones and call them. You can give your condolences that way, but majority of the time you would just go to the house where the body's being kept. Social, they allow people who are not family to know after the burial. So that would be like doctors and bankers and stuff like that. And killing, they have limitations on who can be killed. So if you were to kill, say, like their president, you could get in serious trouble, just like if you were to kill somebody here in the United States. Okay, part 2 is dying and facing one's own death. which is very interesting. So, facing one's own death. School-age children are slowly gaining the knowledge of what death is actually is, and so when people die around them, they don't really know, but they do understand that they're not going to come back. Whereas adults and adolescents, we understand that it's permanent, and it's inevitable. So at this age, they may have already had like a pet or a loved one, like a grandparent, die, and so they're more knowledgeable to the death and what comes with it. Even though the topic of death is different between the groups, the one thing that everyone has in common is that every culture and age deals with death differently. So they grieve differently, they act differently with the subject of death. And then someone who comes from a loved family will most likely be more upset than somebody who comes from a trauma past and somebody whose parents like abused them. They won't really feel as much sympathy as the ones who came from a loving family. Okay, in American culture, if I were to see the news that I only had a short time to live, right now I'd probably feel robbed. I am only 19, so I'd feel like I had a lot more time to live. Though I would understand, because it would be my time to go. It's when the good Lord would want me to go. So, but I would feel robbed. I would feel cheated of life, like I think most of us would if they were to die at a young age. I would want to spend like my following days with family and friends and doing the things that I love to do and things I have never done, just to really fulfill the life that I will soon be losing. I would, for like my burial and stuff, I would pick out my flowers, and I would also pick out what I would be buried in, because I don't want to be buried in something awful looking. So I would pick out what I would be buried in. And I would want this time to be a celebration of like my life and all I have done, instead of a mourning of what I've lost or what they've lost. And I would choose to be buried in a cemetery that follows the American culture. In Albania culture, there are many similarities and many differences with the American and the Albanian culture. Some similarities would be both cultures bury our dead, which we do, but they don't have the option. They have to bury the dead. We both use songs at funerals. Theirs are more of a traditional song, whereas ours are what we feel and what the deceased liked, so to say. And we each have a mourning period. So for them, they take roughly around 40 days to like mourn the deceased and everything, and then after that 40 days, it's kind of like, okay, it's done. Whereas we take a lot longer to mourn and grieve about the dead that we've lost. Okay, part 3, grieving, the way we handle death in each culture. A few definitions. Grief is defined as deep sorrow, especially that caused by someone's death. It causes mental suffering or distress with a pain regret. So, in American culture, we tell the family by phone or social media. We normally, somebody dies, say your Grandpa Joe dies, you normally call the family and be like, hey, Grandpa passed, here's our arrangements. And most of the time the family that's the closest to them will arrange the funeral and pick out the decorations and flowers and stuff like that. We discuss the death of someone. We normally try to be sensitive to the family and try to speak good about the dead. We don't want to speak bad about them because they're not here to defend themselves. Some of the rituals associated with my culture or if someone who is not an A-lister or famous normally has a simple burial, funeral. When they normally don't have limos or hundreds of thousands of people gathered around their memorial service as a famous person would. The ceremonies usually involve viewing the day before. So you'll come the night before, you'll view the body if it's an open casket, and then the next day, the funeral, which would be held by a preacher. You would give his testimony and everything, and then and follow it by they're in a better place, and for us not to be sad, this is a happy time because they're going to be wherever. And then at American funerals, it's okay to show someone's emotion. A lot of times you'll see people crying, sobbing, like falling to their knees, just really in a predicament. In the Albania culture, though, despite religious backgrounds or beliefs, many Albanians hold a 40-day mourn to the dead. Like I was saying, this is the time that friends and family will gather around at the house of the deceased where the body is being held for those 40 days. And then those of traditional belief do not believe in cremation again. They believe that you need to be buried into the ground, that way you'll rise up, or your soul. Arrangements are usually prepared by the family and close friends, as ours is. Once people arrive at the gravesite, there will be a burial followed by traditional songs, prayers, and greetings. And if one wants to give their condolences, it starts with immediate family, and then it goes to next of kin and dwindles down from there. Thank you.